For photos indoors or in low light situations, you may want to set the camera to the indoor scene mode, or you could also set the low light mode, but you'll need to know more about it and why it should only be used as a very last resort. For more control over the camera functions, you can set the program mode. You might want to use the flash. You may need to increase the ISO, set an appropriate white balance, and set the manual focus. You may also want to know about the slow synchro flash for special effect. Let's go ahead and start by setting the indoor scene mode. Set the mode dial to SCN. On the back of the camera, use the control dial to switch to the indoor scene. With the indoor scene selected, the camera is now optimized for taking pictures indoors. By default, the flash is set to auto, however, I do have control over this. It's very simple to use this mode. Just as with the auto mode, you can compose the picture in the frame the way you want it, press the shutter button halfway to lock focus on the subject, and then press the shutter button the rest of the way to take the picture. Instead of the indoor scene mode, for example in very low light situations, you can use the low light mode. In the low light mode, by default, the flash is not used, because in this mode the ISO is increased to 12,800. Because the ISO is so high, the highest resolution possible is medium. Also, you should note that your picture will turn out a little bit soft because the camera is compensating for the extremely high ISO with very strong noise reduction algorithms. Because the camera's resolution is reduced and the picture softness, I recommend only using this mode as a very last resort. For more control over camera functions, you should use the program mode instead. Turn the mode dial to P. Depending on what you're taking a picture of, you may or may not want to use the flash. For example, if you're just taking a portrait indoors, you can use the flash to illuminate the subject. However, if you're taking a picture of a large group of people at a table, for example, you don't want to use the flash. The reason is the flash will only illuminate those people in the foreground, and everybody in the background will become very, very dark. For this demonstration, I won't use the flash, so I'll keep it turned off. However, in your case, if you want to use the flash, just press the flash button right here. It's the right navigation button. And use the control dial to choose flash on. Give it a second to go away or press the set button. I'm going to avoid using the flash, so I'll turn it off. Because I'm not using the flash, I want to increase the ISO. Auto ISO may be okay. It'll be able to increase it up to 800. However, for an ISO higher than 800, you'll have to set it yourself. To set the ISO, you can either access the function menu by pressing the function button right here, or by default, the camera is set up to use the lens ring in the front to adjust the ISO. So I'll turn my lens ring, and I'll increase the ISO. As you can see, I can increase the ISO to 3200. 3200 will get me a very noisy image, so I want to maintain the cleanest image possible, but still have a fast enough shutter speed. So I'll start with choosing an ISO at about 500 and see how that works out. Now let's go ahead and set the proper white balance. Press the function button right here in the center. Go down one to select the white balance option. Use the control dial to move the highlighted field to the appropriate white balance setting. Again, because I'm not using the flash, I'm not going to choose the flash white balance option. However, if you are using the flash, this would be a good option to use. Since this scene is indoors, I'm going to choose tungsten. Most everyday household lights are tungsten. Go ahead and press set to escape the function menu. Now with the white balance properly set, my ISO is increased, my flash is turned off, I'm ready to take my picture. First, however, I want to make sure the ISO is properly set. So how do we do this? Go ahead and press the shutter button halfway. With the shutter button pressed halfway, you can see the shutter speed the camera chose down here. Mine is 1/100th of a second. In your case, you'll probably have a little bit less light, so it may be slower. If your shutter speed setting is not slower than 1/30th of a second, the ISO you selected is fine. If the ISO is set too high, the shutter speed will be too fast. For example, mine right now is set to 1/100th of a second. I can use a slower shutter speed and still be able to handhold the camera. And by reducing the ISO, I'll maintain a better quality image. So I'll press the function button this time and move up to the ISO setting right here. And I'll choose 400 ISO. Then press set. And now I'll press my shutter button halfway again. Now I'm at 1/80th of a second, which should be just fine. If you're able to lock focus on your target, you don't need to use the manual focus. Place the focusing square over the subject, press the shutter button halfway, and if the focusing square turns green, you don't need to use the manual focus. You can just recompose the image and press the shutter button the rest of the way to take the shot. However, if the camera is not able to lock focus and the focusing square turns yellow, you'll want to use the manual focus. To set the manual focus, just press the left navigation button or the manual focus icon right here, and use the control dial or the right navigation button to choose manual focus. Give it a second to go away or press set. With the manual focus set, I have a gauge right here on the right hand side, and I can use the control dial to set this to the rough distance between the camera and the subject. Usually I'll set this to about 5 feet and then position myself about 5 feet from the subject. You can change the distance units to meters and centimeters in the camera's menu. With my subject about 5 feet from the camera, I can press the shutter button halfway. This will lock the exposure, and then I can press the shutter button the rest of the way to take the picture. For extremely low light situations, such as a bar or a club scene, you should use the manual focus because the camera's autofocus will probably not be able to find a focus point. And I would recommend using the slow synchro flash setting. So press the flash button and move over to slow synchro. What this will do is use the flash to illuminate the subject of your picture, but it'll keep the shutter speed open long enough to expose for the ambient light. This can create a very cool effect for your pictures. In the program mode, the camera's shutter speed will not be slower than 1 second. So you should increase or decrease the ISO in order to change the amount of ambient light exposed in the picture. Go ahead and press the shutter button halfway. You'll see what the shutter speed is set to, and then when you're ready to take your picture, press the shutter button the rest of the way.